I'm Zach.
If you haven't joined us for this show before, what we essentially do is we have a topic, and then each of us have to pick a top 3 in said topic, and then we fight it out to figure out in the final top 3 who has more. So, Zach, what are we battling on today?
So, this year marks 25 years since the Vans Warped Tour launched.
Stop making me feel old.
You're old. Get over it.
No.
You're old.
Stop it.
So old. And last year...
What?
What? Get off my lawn. So 2018 marked the last year that Warped Tour embarked on a nationwide trek. But this summer, they're celebrating the 25th anniversary by doing 3 shows. 2 two-day festivals in California and Atlantic City, which I'm so excited for, and then 1 full day in Cleveland. So,
thank you, Cleveland.
Hello, Cleveland. So I thought it would be a lot of fun if we picked the 3 bands that define what Warped Tour was. So with that in mind, I want to go first. I want to share which 3 bands I think really are the definition of what the Warped Tour was, or capture what it was.
All right, go for it.
Yeah. I wasn't really asking for your permission, but thank you.
Well, I'm telling you to go for it.
Oh, okay, great.
Smooth transition.
I don't need you to tell me what I can and can't do.
Smooth operator.
All right, the first band that I think defines what Warped Tour was, Every Time I Die. They played Warped Tour 8 tours in total. I'm sure they've done like a few select dates here and there too, but 8 years they've been on Warped Tour in some fashion. And in my eyes, they are the quintessential metalcore band of Warped Tour, because everyone is familiar with the punk bands, even the alt-rock bands that are on it, but each year there's always been a select group of really cool, heavy metal bands that have been on the tour, and Every Time I Die is essentially the best example of that. Jordan Buckley, the guitarist, has even created artwork for the tour and some of their posters in the past. And what's actually kind of funny is that Jordan tried to be the last person anyone heard at Warped Tour. So on the final date of the cross-country touring edition, Jordan actually kept playing on stage, even as the roadies and everyone was taking down equipment and everything, and they actually had to pull the plug on him. So Pennywise was technically the last band that played at the touring version of Warped Tour. And I think Jordan was only like a few minutes off from beating that record, but that's how much they loved being on Warped Tour, is that Jordan wanted to be the last thing anyone heard at Warped Tour, and he came so close. Apparently he was even saying that the roadies even gave him a little extra time just because they felt kind of bad, and was like, oh, let's give him a shot. And they were like, no, we have to pull it. So that's the first band.
Okay.
Every Time I Die. Second band, and this one I feel like if you fight me on this, Matt, then you need to just leave. You need to leave your own house.
Go on.
Less Than Jake. They have appeared on Warped Tour more than any other band. Not only have they appeared on 12 tours, but they've played over 365 Warped shows. And that's including, or it's going to be including, this summer when they're playing the festival dates. And, I mean, at this point, they literally are a staple of Warped. And they're really a great representation of the punk, pop, ska bands that Warped is really associated with, especially in the early years. So, Less Than Jake, second band. The third, Paramore. They've appeared on at least 6 Warped Tours, and they are a great example of 2 things. One, they're a great representation of the emo, pop, punk, and alt-rock bands that primarily dominated the Warped Tour during the mid to late 2000s. And they're also a great example of a band that got their start on Warped Tour and then over time became so popular and, dare I say, even mainstream, that they actually outgrew not only their pop-punk roots, but ultimately the tour itself. To the point where I don't think they, and there's a few other bands I can think of in mind, but Paramore especially, they, for the last few years, Warped Tour tried to keep getting them back on the tour, but they were essentially saying, no, we're kind of too big for this. Sorry. So there you have it. My 3, Every Time I Die, Less Than Jake, and Paramore. Matt, try to top me. I dare you.
Okay.
I dare you.
All right. Well, let's just get this one out of the way real quick. Less Than Jake is on the list.
All right.
I mean, if you think about Warped Tour, you have to think...
Were they on your list as well, or are you just admitting that I'm right?
No, they were on my list.
Okay.
Because when you think about the Warped Tour, you think about all those, the pop, punk, ska, that's what the tour was known for in the beginning. So, yeah, they've been on there as many years as you've said that they've been on there, they're a staple on this lineup. So, I mean, there's no way that you don't have them on the list.
All right.
Okay. Next, going down that same road, what you said with the pop punk, I don't have an exact count of how many tours that they were on. They were on a whole bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going with Pennywise. Same thing, pop punk. What was the Warped Tour known for? They were known for, punk in the very beginning. Vans, when they started this whole thing, they were very melded in with the skater community, and they were, a big proponent of like almost like the SoCal lifestyle with skating and the punk scene and the whole thing. So I went with Pennywise.
Also, for the record, they've been on at least 8 tours.
Right. So, I mean, Pennywise is another one that's been up there.
Yeah.
And finally, it's funny that you started to mention Paramore with Getting Too Big.
Mm-hmm.
Because my final band actually was on the very early days of the Warped Tour, still going with the punk theme. And I'm going with Blink-182.
Interesting. Continue.
Because exactly what you said about Paramore is the exact reason that I thought Blink-182. Because they started, let me see, this is 1996 is when they started. 4 tours.
Mm-hmm.
And the last tour was right when they blew up with Enema of the State. So right around the change of the millennium, they were ingrained in that scene, and they came up through, with all of their punk albums, and then they hit it big with the pop punk, and they just transcended the tour, and they didn't actually come back to the tour for the entire span of the tour.
It's funny you pick Blink-182 because they've played around 4 Warped Tours,
mm-hmm.
and they're playing the Atlantic City date,
mm-hmm.
and that was probably, seeing their name on the lineup made me go, we gotta get tickets.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't really argue too much against Blink-182 just because of, when you think of the pop punk that made Warp so famous, that's hard. Even if they were on the tour less than certain bands that we mentioned, it's kind of hard not to think them.
Right. It's also the embodiment of what the festival really did. Like you said, for a lot of bands, it took them from a very small band to being much more well-known. It's just when it happened to Blink, it happened in the very early days of the tour, and because they blew up so big and they were in the mainstream at that point, that they couldn't go back to just doing festivals.
So I think before we go into the round out the final 3, and I think I have a compromise list as well. But before we get into that, I kind of also just want to highlight how, while you definitely think of Warped for the harder style of music or the pop punk stuff, it's kind of remarkable when you look at the list of bands who've been on Warped Tour for select dates or at least 1 year. And one that comes to mind that I still think is hysterical is Katy Perry. In theory, she kind of got her start on Warped Tour. She was a Christian musician for a little bit, and then right before her album that feature, I forget the name of it, but it features I Kissed the Girl in it, before it really blew up, because she was dating Travis McCoy of Gym Class Heroes during around that time.
And the more that you say this is the more that I remember that there was it her and was Demi Lovato on there too? Or am I thinking of another tour?
You might be thinking of another tour, but I wouldn't be surprised either. But Katy Perry was on the tour, and she did the whole thing. And even then, she was a little bit more poppy for the tour, it just kind of highlights how Warped Tour could get away with having a weird act on its lineup, or even get away with having hip-hop like Eminem and Ice-T on the tour. I actually love the story of when Ice-T called up the Warped Tour guys. It was like, hey, I want to play on a few dates. And they were like, well, we already have the lineup set up, and we can't really afford to have you even for a few shows. He was like, please, do I look like I need money? I just want to play. And he just killed it too. Like, he talked about how he was hanging out with Fat Mike and the NoFX guys backstage, and he won over the crowd, even though he was completely a different type of style of music for that festival. So I think Warped doesn't get enough credit for being such a diverse offering of music as it really was.
It's fair enough. Yeah, I mean, looking at the lineup of some of the bands, like you could go, like you started out with Every Time I Die. I mean, there's the Dropkick Murphys, Avenged Sevenfold that played.
Avenged Sevenfold is a great example of a band, another kind of band that just became so different.
Mm-hmm. And then there's Bowling for Soup.
That's the kind of bands that you would expect to see at Warped Tour.
They're just them.
Some 41, even Simple Plan. Like, I feel like this is the only kind of festival that you could get excited to have Simple Plan on its lineup, because they just, of course, they should be on Warped Tour. I think they played
a lot too.
A lot. I don't know the number offhand, but I think even like for I think
it was at least 6.
I think definitely. I was actually surprised when I was looking back. My Chemical Romance, because I know that when there is a band that most fans say this is the band I want to see at Warped Tour, so many fans go to My Chemical Romance to the point where Kevin Lyman, one of the founders of the festival, had to even say, like, listen, guys, we try to get My Chemical Romance. Actually, it's My Chemical Romance, Fall Out Boy, and Paramore are the 3 bands that Kevin Lyman has had to say, listen, we've tried to get those specific bands, and they won't do it. Even for the summer festivals, he was like, we tried getting My Chemical Romance. They wouldn't do it. But they only played 2 times on the tour.
There wasn't that many. Yeah,
whereas like a band like Simple Plan has played a ton on it. I mean, Sum 41 alone has played 8 times. It's funny. I'm glad that you went with Less Than Jake too, because I kept going back and forth between them and Real Big Fish.
Yeah, there's a bunch of them that I kind of rolled together.
But like, Less Than Jake, 12 tours. You can't beat that.
Less Than Jake, No Effects, Pennywise. Yeah. I was even tempted to go with Anti-Flag.
Yeah, they've been on the tour a ton. That's a good example too. So here's the compromise I want to make. And I'm actually kind of in pain making this compromise, but
there's creams for that.
Nothing works for me. All right, so we both agreed Less Than Jake.
Okay. So that's one.
That's one. I would give you Blink-182.
Okay.
If you give me Every Time I Die.
I'm completely okay with that.
And here's why I'm actually, I do think.
There was no fighting in that. Wow.
I think Paramore. So Paramore is definitely I still believe that they're a better pick than Blink-182. Even though I'm a much bigger Blink-182 fan. I think in regards to showcasing how a band went from being the emo band that was on one of the stages at Warped Tour to selling out arenas, Paramore's the better example, both in size of popularity as well as how drastically they changed musically. However, going back to what I revealed earlier, in that when I saw the lineup for the Atlantic City date of the festival this summer, and as soon as I saw Blink-182's name on it, I immediately bought tickets. And to me, that just goes to show you how much weight. And it wasn't even just because I like Blink-182, but it's because as soon as I saw their name, I was like, yeah, this is the Warped Tour to go to.
And that's what this list is about, is who is Warped Tour. Warped Tour is Blink-182.
And even though they played 4 Warped Tours, which compared to a lot of other bands is not as many, I think that just speaks volumes.
Right. That's how big they blew up at that point in time.
So to recap.
Yep. No fighting necessary.
No fighting necessary. Well, we can still fight if you want.
I don't need another couch.
You jerk.
Hey.
Emotionally attacking you now.
Listen here, guy. Guy? I'm going to... All right, I don't know where I'm going with this.
I'm just making grunt noises now at this point. That's how much we are in agreement over this. That I'm like, I have nothing to just throw at you. So to recap. These are the 3 bands that, in our opinions, define Warped Tour. Less Than Jake, Every Time I Die, and Blink-182. Are we correct? We know we are. But do you disagree?
It's the interwebs. Somebody's going to agree.
Yeah, do you think... do you think we're missing a band completely? Do you also have memories of going to Warped Tour that still resonate with you, that still make you think fondly at this time?
Did you fall in love at the rock show?
Yeah, how did we not come up with more Blink-182 puns for this one?
I don't know. We weren't worried about the small things.
Damn it.
Now that you're saying it, I'll go.
Damn it. Boom, got one in. Let us know what you think about our list, who you'd name, as well as just your own personal memories from Warped. on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at Epic Footnote. We love to hear from you, and we hope you tune in for another episode.
Take it easy, guys.